This is Dennis Raimondi. You're listening to a podcast from the Coffee League, found at thecoffeeleague.com. My guest today, Erika Vonie. Did I pronounce your last name
Yes.
correctly? And
Yes, you
Erika
did, Erika Vonie.
is a saleswoman at Green Coffee Sales in crop to cup coffee importers. She's been in coffee a number of years. We're going to talk about that, and also I want to get into. She ran a conference recently that focused on women in coffee and specific issues in regard to that. So we want to talk about all that today. But first, Erika, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk with me today.
You're very welcome, Dennis. Thanks for asking me to have a conversation.
And how long have you been in coffee, and how did your journey to coffee start and wind up where it is today?
Well, I started in college in a second wave shop to kind of help pay my way through college. I was a film and photography major, so I needed to pay for all my supplies, and working in coffee was a really easy way to have a job with my course load. And then when I graduated, I moved to Philadelphia, and to get a job just to make some money, I found myself at Lovers and Mad Men in West Philadelphia, like right next to UPenn's campus. And that was my very first specialty job. And from there, it just kept rolling, and that was in 2010. So
Now before you
yeah,
worked in coffee, were you a coffee drinker?
not really, honestly. Like the first job that I had, we had an entire menu and like 32 different flavored syrups behind the bar. So like my idea of a good coffee drink was something that tasted like a melted down Snickers bar.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people, myself included, will say they started drinking coffee to stay awake in college to study for exams. That was part of it with me. Yeah, and then
Yeah.
that taste evolved. And you're probably further down the path of coffee evolution than I am. But I certainly have gained a tremendous appreciation of specialty coffee in the last couple of years. In your case now, I usually ask this at the end of the interview, but I'll ask you at the beginning. What is your coffee consumption like? How much coffee do you drink, and what do you like to drink?
That's kind of funny because with my job now, working for an importer, we have to cup every coffee that comes through and decide if we're going to try to buy it and then sell it to roasters. So my caffeine intake per day is probably around like 24 ounces at any given time. Like when I'm cupping for work, I try to spit it out, but you still absorb caffeine through your mouth, and
Right.
it's kind of gotten to a point now where I wake up and make myself a pour over, and it's almost like just drinking a glass of water.
Right. I'm getting to that point. And also, I should say that you've been in a number of competitions, barista competitions. Tell us about that. Is that something you enjoy? Because I've watched a number, and they're really intense, and I very much admire the people that go into them. When did you start that, and what's that experience like?
Well, I started in 2013 doing some competitions. My boss at the time, Aaron Ultimo, is a head judge in the USBC circuit, and he saw a lot of potential in me. And so I've been doing the USBC level competitions for about 5 years. I did Brewers Cup this last December, and then a little bit before that in October, I competed in a different style of coffee competition called Coffee Masters, which is like an international like tournament style, like 3-day long like endurance test of making coffee. And I really enjoy it. I love competition. I think it's a great way to be visible and to kind of create a thesis. I like describing them almost as like TED Talks, but like meets the tasting menu. So I really like it. But I think because I've been competing for so long, it's time for me to step down and be a judge and allow that competition space that I was taking up to be taken up by someone new who's never done it before. I'd like to see more newer baristas who might not have that opportunity, like people of color, LGBTQIA, gender non-binary. So removing myself from that allows people, not me, to compete. So
That's a
but I
great
love
point.
it.
Yeah, that leads us into what I want to get into with you now, and that is, well, I want to talk about women in coffee and your perspective on that and the conference you ran, but also LGBT people, and people that are marginalized, people of color, whatever. What's their place in coffee? And when I do my interviews, by the way, I really try try to select people from every, women, men, every different angle. And what you uncover in any industry is there's issues. Some in some industries more than others. But give us your perspective on being a woman in coffee and just what the industry is like, where it's strong and where it needs to improve.
That's a
Start
a
wherever you
beautiful
want. We'll
in
go
that
from
you've
there.
just gotten me. Yeah, this could be a start for a while, but I'll start with my own personal perspective and then kind of broaden it from there. So, being a woman in coffee, just like in many industries that we've been seeing in food service and the entertainment world, farmers, we've all been affected by the Me Too movement and a lot of vocalization of women just across the board, sharing their experiences. And, not every woman goes through an abusive work situation, but we see it. We see it happen to our friends and our coworkers, that we hear about it. And I think that we're in a pretty pivotal moment right now for women in coffee to be able to be given a voice, to step up and share our experiences and use our power as a unified force. And I like seeing that expanded to all marginalized people. And it's interesting. There's so many different facets, but I guess I'll focus in like a trickle down theory sort of thing, where we look at the visibility of the winners, the world barista champions, the people that get the press, that have a lot of exposure and visibility as being the quote unquote best of the best. And predominantly it's been men. There hasn't been a single woman or gender non-binary person to win the World Barista Championship. And a lot of them have been white men. And we see that, and we see that as like the barometer of success. And it has an impact when there aren't more women in that high echelon of competitors, if there aren't people of color up there, it has an effect on the baristas that don't look like the winners, that are working just as hard and are just as good and deserve a space and deserve to be taken seriously. I've been talking to a lot of friends of mine recently, and a lot of people that don't work in coffee, and have been posing them this question. And it's, close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, when I say, picture your barista, what do you see? And one of the things that's been very shocking to me, actually not very shocking at all, is the majority of the answers are, I see a white man with a beard, wearing an apron, and he's got tattoos.
Right.
And then the second response is like a pretty artsy white woman.
Right.
And yeah, when you think about people that work in coffee, especially coffee is a privileged industry. It's geared towards, I guess it is, at least when I started, it was geared towards like college students and like young adults who are, trying to make money on the side, or trying to have a job that allows them to pursue their other pursuits. And it's unfortunate that that's the image that's put out there. That's on the BuzzFeed listicles, that's in the magazines and on TV, and is these like white artsy kids. And I know so many people of color who are awesome at coffee, that are vocal about it, that like know so much. One of my personal coffee heroes is Candace Madison. She is currently the director of education at Irving Farm, and she was my teacher when I got my Q grader certification. And she just knows everything, and she tells it to you in a way that's like just no frills, no nonsense. And she's this amazing powerhouse and this amazing resource. And she's one of the most talented coffee professionals I know, and she's very much in the minority.
Right.
We don't see a lot of baristas that look like her out there, but they're there. They exist.
Right.
So I think in the competition world, because we see these people of privilege, they have access and money and time and resources to go do the competition. That's why we think that they are the best, and that's just not the case.
Right.
So it's it falls under the work of a lot of employers to make sure that not only are they hiring a diverse crew, because I feel like there's strength in diversity. I think that the more diverse and the more broad of a mindset and experience base the baristas in our industry are, the stronger we are.
Right.
So it's employers to make sure that they're employing that workforce, but then also supporting them.
Right.
That's the biggest thing.
Right. Well, let me ask you.
Time in.
Yeah, Erika, one question along those lines. You're in New York, and the last few months I've traveled over a lot of Europe and much of the States, and literally hundreds of cafes going into. And I was in New York for the New York Coffee Festival in October, and went to my wife and I went to many places, and it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like New York, as a city, it's more diverse than most cities. But I did
Mm-hmm.
feel that when you mentioned people of color, when you mentioned people that are not stereotypically men or women, what you think of when you think of a barista, that there was more diversity in New York. I'm sure New York has lots of problems like anywhere else, but do you think that
Mm-hmm.
there are areas of the country where, let's stick with the United States now, where there's bigger problems in regard to women or people of color or LGBT people in coffee than other areas of the country?
Oh, definitely. I
Mm,
mean, you look at the sociopolitical and economic structure of Middle America, anywhere outside of like a major international hub, and yeah, I mean the problems that exist in society are going to be the problems that exist in coffee as well. One of the things that I think is beautiful about coffee is that it's a great connector. It's a
mm,
community builder. You can open up a coffee shop in any neighborhood and hire your local people and really make it exactly what the community needs.
mm,
And when a community doesn't actually have that diversity and it doesn't have access to just people, different sorts of people, yeah, you'll see defined concentrations of one group of people because coffee is indicative of the climate at large. And New York is a beautifully diverse place, like you
mm,
said. And one of the things that is a problem that a lot of big cities face is gentrification. The idea that
right,
people not from the neighborhood open up a coffee shop and then hire people that don't look like anybody in the
right.
neighborhood to then work there. And one of the shifts that I've seen personally in my years in New York is that it's starting to shift away from that idea. It still happens, of course it does, but
Right.
when coffee shops and cafes and these hubs of the community open up, I've been seeing a lot more neighborhood people, like local people. Like I'll walk into
Right.
my local coffee shops and the
Right.
baristas know that like everybody that comes in.
Right.
It's nice to see the people that live in the neighborhood work in the
Yeah.
neighborhood and
Right.
support
Well,
everyone in the
that's
neighborhood.
one of the things I try to cover in my blog podcast, and that is that not only coffee but coffee culture and how it's really it's so much about it, about how it's a community center. I spend much of the year in Iowa, and there's a cafe there. It's Italian, a fellow started it, but he's really worked to get a very diverse group of baristas, and it's a hub for the community. The community itself, even though it's in Iowa, is quite international. One other thing I wanted to mention, and that is, I spent a bunch of time in Scandinavia this summer. Went to many cafes, and I think there was a more of a balance of men and women baristas. And one of the people I actually, she's on my podcast. I've interviewed her, Joanna. She's owns Drop
Mm-hmm.
Coffee out of Stockholm, and I think in the last three
Mm-hmm.
years she's finished third, fourth, and second in the world roasting championships. So
Yeah.
and been remarkable and is held in very high esteem. And I think like you're saying in these barista competitions, there haven't been women in the competitions or winning as much and all. So that maybe that there are breakthroughs happening in regard to that. Maybe it's going to, Scandinavia is very progressive politically as well
Mm-hmm.
in these areas, and those are places for people to look to. And I also think, yeah, somebody like yourself is done, as I've read about you, a remarkable job in helping to network people to deal with to discuss and confront these issues. Tell us about a conference that you ran recently, and I think its focus was women and other marginalized people in coffee.
Yeah. So in the wake of there was a lawsuit against the owners of Four Barrel.
Right.
8 women very very bravely came forward and filed this lawsuit, and against a workplace that was horribly discriminatory and
Hmm.
abusive and put their lives and safety in danger. And the ripple effect from that, I mean, was, for me personally, was pretty immense. I had many friends come up to me and talk to me about and sharing their experiences, and I myself have unfortunately dealt with workplace abuse, and decided that I didn't want to be angry about it anymore. I don't want to be angry. I want it to change.
Right.
So what I did was I put out a call to women and gender non-binary people and STEM people to come out and see each other, be visible, and know that we care and that we're together. And to my surprise, more than 20 women and gender non-binary folk showed up, and we didn't want to wallow in sharing our stories and have like this big cathartic moment. We were tired of that. And within 2 hours, we nailed some pretty prominent red flags, the things that we wanted to focus most on changing. And it was very impactful for me and very empowering. And a lot of the things that we will continue to do, we're going to meet on a monthly basis. And the call is out there for everyone. I mean, the Facebook group will be open to all of the people that are invited to the meetings. We decided as a group that respectfully, we are not inviting men and male identifying, masculine people because we need this space.
Right. Is there an online meeting space for that group?
There's a Facebook group and there's an email thread right now. My work and personal life have been a little bit hectic, so I haven't been able to expand that to anything greater yet. But yeah, that's where the hub is. If people wanted to find me on Facebook and to join the group, you're more than welcome. We are going to be compiling resources, and I've spoken to a lawyer, and the resources that we gather will be open to everybody, because the education of everyone is the most important, even if the space needs to be exclusively for us as a meeting place and a place of empowerment and a place of safety. And we've decided that we're going to create something called the handbook. And what exactly that looks like just yet is to be determined, but it's going to be a collected resource that we will be offering free to people that work in the industry and their employers. And we want to compile legal resources for the employers to know what their rights are, because it's so important for them to know how to protect themselves and also how to protect their employees, and what legal actions they can take to protect everyone involved. And then also the employees themselves. Because I think what a lot of the things that happen are these, like, they're smaller, maybe microaggressions that might add up, and moments that, like, you can't really pinpoint and define as, like, this is wrong. I just know that this shouldn't be happening, but I don't know exactly how to fix it or what my rights are in this moment. So that's one of the main things that we're going to be putting together. And then I think for a little bit more accessible, a little bit more quick and more visual, we're going to be putting together video PSAs. And they're going to be very quick. They're open source, and they will be geared towards coffee specifically, and the problems that we as women and gender non-binary femme folk have faced as baristas. But the message will stand true that they can, be used across many industries. And essentially, we would like there to be a shift in the general ethos of everything in the industry, which is a very lofty goal, but we know that it's a pyramid. It's all built on a foundation and strong steps.
What if go ahead.
Yeah. I guess like a final wrap-up thought on that part is that, we can't do this without men and male-identifying people. We can't have this erasure of bias in a more open and accepting place if we don't, actively involve literally everybody. So it's not that we want to be exclusionary. That's not the goal. It's just to figure out how to get there is important, and to not be rushed.
And how cooperative in regard to this, and how proactive have been some of the big guns that are in specialty coffee, like Stumptown, like Intelligentsia, like La Colombe, Counterculture, the bigger names in the industry. Are they taking a lead? Are they active in this area, or do they need a real push to get them more involved in the activities you're involved in?
That's a very good question. Because to be completely honest with you, I haven't really heard anything from any of the companies that you listed. None of them, as far as I know, and I could be wrong. You can fact check me on this, please. Have come out against Four Barrel, or in its light, maybe responded with a positive sort of like, we are here, we're here for you, we won't do this, like a reaffirmation of values. I haven't seen that in this industry yet. And not to say that it's not there, not to say that they haven't happened internally. Maybe people aren't trying to put it out there because it is sort of showboaty PR stuff sometimes.
Right.
But no, I haven't seen any.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious. Who is? Well, I know some of the people who I just interviewed the marketing director for Stumptown, a woman. But I'm wondering some of the CEOs and some of the major corporate people and I don't know the answer to this in the big companies, Blue Bottle. Are there women represented in a reasonable way at the top? Has there been has it been difficult for women to go on the executive level, on the boards of these bigger companies? Because I think that would have a major influence on what's going on in the industry, and I think that I should do some research on that and maybe do some interviews in regard to that, because I think that ultimately, and also the other area that I'd be curious is on the farms and in Central America and Eastern Africa and all. What's it like there? What are the conditions for women there, and so on and so forth? And is that something that the bigger coffee companies are dealing with?
I think that when you get to a corporate level, you have more access and more resources to involve yourself in issues along the entire supply chain. For sure, you have that resource and that access. I personally don't know on the bigger companies what their policies are, but I do know that there are certain things, certain systems in place for women and the producing women on that end of the supply chain. I've exchanged emails very briefly with Kimberly Eason, the strategic director for the CQI's Gender Equality Initiative. She might be an amazing human being to talk to, I'm sure, with the focus on gender equality at origin. It's unsurprising that coffee is grown by women. Women are the ones that own the farms, run the farms, do the manual labor. Not to say that men aren't there, there definitely are, but by and large, you see men being in control of the money. And there is a system called the International Women's Coffee Association, the IWCA, which has chapters in, I think, 21 or 22 different countries.
Right.
And they have, chapter heads in every single country, and they are in charge of transparency of money along the lines. You can get an IWCA certified coffee, and you know that it is a female producer, and then you know that money is getting back to her. Because a lot of cup quality is about reinvesting in infrastructure, making sure that if you are a buyer, this is essentially my job, but making sure that if you are a buyer, you're investing in the people that you're buying from, and you are committing to return investments year after year. Even when harvests are bad, you figure out places to put that coffee, to contract it, because ultimately, when you look at quality of life for the people that are actually growing the coffee, the producers, when that quality of life is high, cup quality is high as well.
Right,
it's a pretty much a no-brainer. But the only origin that I've been to so far in my coffee career is Nicaragua. I have yet to go with my company. I'm still relatively new on staff. That will change soon. But I remember when I was there, asking one of our local guides what sex education was like for women in Nicaragua and in the areas that we were in. And the in-country partner, the guide, was kind of like, it doesn't exist. So we get these women without education, without ways to understand what's happening in their sexual lives, getting pregnant and having to drop out of school and not getting that education. They're running the farms, they're working manual labor, they're putting in their entire lives into this operation, but they don't have the education or the facilities to protect themselves, educate themselves, get that money back. This isn't completely across the board, of course, but these are issues that do happen, and it's tough because I personally don't know enough about the quality of life of every single farmer in every single producing region. But I do know that with some companies, like my company, Crop to Cup included, there is a concerted effort to reinvest into that infrastructure to make sure that they are taken care of, that their quality of life is high. And
Right.
honestly, I don't even know what kind of like bias protection or like education there can be,
Right.
because I think there is probably even more pressing daily matters at hand to attend to
Right.
for these producers.
Right. And there are organizations like the World Coffee Research that mostly
Hmm.
deals with agricultural issues, but I think in terms of labor issues and all as well. So those are organizations that might be dealing with that already. I would be very curious and excited for you to recommend folks to me to speak in this and more, and maybe we could even have a within my podcast on coffee and coffee culture worldwide. We could have a even a subcategory or a series on women in coffee or marginalized people in coffee and every angle on it. I'm sure when I'm done with this interview, I'll have more questions and to really put it in the forefront, let people know about it, what's going on, because ultimately my
Hmm.
goal is to educate people about coffee and every aspect of it.
Yeah.
So it's so yeah, this is stimulating a lot of thought for me, and I think it's great the work that you're doing. It needs to be done, and it's very timely to do it now. What are your plans for the next year or so in regard to aside from your day job of being in green coffee sales at Crop to Cup Coffee Importers? What other organizational or will you be putting together other conferences or what sorts of things you're thinking about?
This year is the year to do it. You're totally right, Dennis.
Right.
I'm going to continue my work with my gender bias initiative
Hmm.
in New York. Um, we're due for another meeting very soon, and I'm very excited to see the ball rolling there and to create content that is accessible to all. We will be working alongside the hashtag Coffee2 project, which is run by Molly Flynn out
Hmm.
of Seattle. That is going to be a more national-based bias and abuse busting sort of organization. They've already raised a ton of money to help facilitate a lot of their goals and needs. And so the New York chapter, it's not necessarily going to be like a Coffee2 chapter, but
Right.
all the resources that we create, we will share with the hashtag Coffee2 movement. I will be continuing to speak with Kimberly Eason at the Gender Equality Initiative run through the CQI. And then in April, there's SCA and there's the RICO Symposium. I've applied to be a RICO Fellow, and hopefully I can hear back from that and get involved in that regard. And I have some friends who are going to be competing in the United States Barista Championship who are marginalized folk. They're queer women. They're people of color. And I'm going to do everything that I possibly can to get them every single piece of equipment that they need, emotional support, taste all their coffees, get them their flavor notes, and just be in the audience, just gassing them up like the
Great,
entire
great.
time.
Well, okay,
Yeah.
Erica, congratulations on all the great work you're doing. 6 months from now, a
Thank you,
year from
Dennis.
now, I want to have you back on the show so we can get updates in regard to what you're doing. And also, as when we go off the air, I'll be asking you for some recommendations of people that can speak further on this subject. So, thanks again for taking the time to come on. It's been greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Dennis, and thanks for letting me talk about a part of coffee that doesn't really get a whole lot of space.
Well, we're here to discuss all and every aspect of coffee, coffee industry, coffee culture. Thank you again.
Hmm. Thanks, Dennis.